Welcome to another round of coffee and donuts. I'm Frank. I'm a former federal law enforcement officer. Now I'm the director of training here at Armageddon. I have 3 pre-submitted questions, and this is Coffee and Donuts, where we answer your questions to the police hiring process, the academy, FTO, anything about your law enforcement career. Let's jump in. Before I get to the questions over here, we answer all our questions on all our socials. So if you have a question, go ahead, leave a comment in any of our socials. I will tell you predominantly where we start off with is our comments over on YouTube, but more importantly now is our comments now in our personal blog at our website, armageddonct.com. If you leave a comment at our blog, either on our main blog page or our individual blog pages, give us a thumbs up, give us a like over there, let us know what you want to hear more about or any questions you have. We will be sure to get to them first. Now, for the questions I have submitted, I really like these questions, and I'm going to kind of jump into it here with one that's going to be a little bit more in depth, and then we'll go from there. Actually, all these are going to be pretty in depth. So, first one, I've been addressing everyone from the department, sir and ma'am, at every encounter. PHQ, drop-off, oral boards, orientation, BI, interview, PAT, poly. Just want to make sure there's no such thing as doing too much. During boards, it feels a little monotonous saying yes, no, sir, ma'am. I know is going to be expected once the academy starts, but just wanted to know I'm in the right. Yeah, so deliverability, right, or how you deliver that yes sir, yes ma'am, no sir, no ma'am, it will impact you, but that's going to be more in a mature aspect. So, and it could just be the way I'm reading this question. If you're a younger applicant, right, and you're yes sir, no ma'am, and it's coming across as due to maturity, that could have a negative impact because they want to see maturity from a candidate. Now, what I'm not telling you to do is do not stop that. It's always yes, sir, no, ma'am, unless they specifically tell you otherwise, right? Unless they tell you to do something different, then do something different. Depending on where you are and the way societal norms are going nowadays, how you address people could often or sometimes even offend them, especially depending if they're an individual that prefers to identify as something other than what their gender is at birth or anything along those lines. And I don't want to get into the politics of that, but ultimately if they tell you to identify them as something different, respect their wishes and do so. But you are 100% usually safe with the yes sir, no ma'am kind of persona, and I adopt that all the time. I go in there, and if I'm unsure, then I just call them by what they introduce themselves. Sergeant Smith, Lieutenant Johnson, or whatever. Deputy, whatever. ABC, right? Put whatever it is in there. But yeah, I don't think you're doing too much. Just make sure you're not coming across as immature, not immature in a negative way. It's like you're showing your age. If you're 21 and your voice is cracking at saying yes sir and no ma'am, much like mine did earlier in this video. Wish I was 21. But yeah, then try just add a little bit of charisma to it. Yes sir, no ma'am. Right, put a little emphasis to it. But I think you're perfectly fine, and I think you're absolutely right getting ready for the academy that way. So don't change. Just make sure the deliverability is coming through clean. Next question. What is the difference between a VSA and a polygraph? So voice stress analyzer, which is a VSA, or CVSA is sometimes what it's referred to, and a polygraph. So a VSA is, think of it as a polygraph. They're all some type of deception or lie detector. Just keep that in mind. One just measures specific voice fluctuations. The other one measures multiple different interpretations. So it could be heart rate, breathing, O2 stat, shiftability, pupil dilation. That would be your full panel polygraph. And with all that, whether one's more accurate or less accurate than the other, the VSA focuses on a lot of different voice things. So the polygraph will have those voice things, but the VSA might dive a little bit deeper into your voice. Your pitch, your frequency, breaks, specific. If you follow someone's voice stress, you'll see certain peaks and certain flats and certain different aspects to when they say yes or no. Sometimes when someone says yes and you're following a frequency, you'll see that it hit up, peak really sharp, come down, but then kind of drag out or roll over to another peak, or just go straight up, straight down, or maybe they'll, and then when you see something different, that's what they're looking at in their VSA and looking for any type of abnormalities compared to your baseline. But both are doing the same thing. One's just focusing strictly on voice stressors, and the other one is focusing on voice stressors and a multitude of other things. But one, the VSA is going to go more in depth into the voice stressors and look for more specific things and more interpretations. Whereas the poly, while the poly could do that and does do that, they're also looking at a multitude of other things that go with it. But yeah, the biggest difference that I would say with them is you have to sit still with both of them. You can't turn your head with your VSA because you're going to be mic'd up, and if you move, you might change the fluctuation. But the polygraph, if you move side to side, usually you're sitting on the pad or your feet are on a pad, and it's feeling pressure and weight changes and things like that. So both are stressful for people because they never know what they're getting into, and this is a very odd thing that people. It's an abnormal thing that most people won't ever go through for employment, right? So everyone's kind of always a little bit nervous, which is fine. You can be nervous, but the poly the full panel poly, in my opinion, is more susceptible to human error because there's so many different screens and things you're looking at, interpretations, and while your voice might be coming through really clean, you might have had a hiccup or something, or you might have moved or shifted your weight, and it's more evaluators, but it's more things that can be misinterpreted. That's my take on it. Okay. I'm more curious, next question. I'm more curious what they are able to find out from a hospital and from medical records, etc. It only interests me because there's so many laws protecting personal information regarding medical history. So do they have a way to just bypass that or what? Nothing to hide from me. I'm just generally curious. Okay, so yes, they do have a way to bypass that. It's called consent, and you're giving it to them when you apply. So when you apply, you are signing consent away that you'll give them access to, certain records or certain information, and you won't be dishonest, right? Usually you're doing that. A lot of times you got to get these things notarized. And what it is let's look at it from the military. If you've ever seen any of those old military movies where, I'm going to go back to the original Captain America, where he's trying to get into the military and he keeps getting rejected because he has all these medical issues. Well, a lot of times people say, well, there's protected classes and you can't disqualify someone based on their medical history. Well, that's true. There are protected classes out there. Perfect example is age, right? A lot of times you can't not hire someone because of, and the protected class of age is usually when you're older, not when you're younger. So you can't hire someone, just because, or you can't turn someone down just because they're over a certain age. Well, in law enforcement, you can do that. Law enforcement, you can put an age cap on it. And it's been upheld in courts because they said the arduous, rigorous duties of a law enforcement officer require someone to be, physically fit. A lot of federal law enforcement departments do this, where the max age cap to get in is 37, and it's a forced retirement at 57, unless you promote to certain executive and anyway. But it's usually a forced retirement at 57. And other local and state departments will do that too. A lot of state police will have an age cap on them. And the reason why is because of the rigorous and arduous duties that a law enforcement officer has to do. And that's upheld. It's legitimate. Well, it's the same thing with medical. Going into the military, if you have certain underlying medical conditions that may be made worsened by your service, they're going to reject you. Well, it's the same thing with law enforcement. Right? You have certain medical conditions that they believe, you as a law enforcement officer will prohibit or stop you from properly performing the duties of a law enforcement officer, right? That right there is going to get you disqualified, because the last thing they want to do is put someone out on the street that can't perform the duties needed, right? And then you, your partner, or worse, someone in society or one of the citizens get hurt because you were unable to complete your duties. In DC, they have what's called a statutory misdemeanor, which means most misdemeanors you can only be imprisoned up to a year. This one's a statutory misdemeanor, and it's a 2 year. You can be imprisoned up to 2 years on this one, and it's only for law enforcement. And it's failure to act. I haven't checked on. I don't know if it has been repealed or changed or anything like that. But it's a law saying, hey, if you're a law enforcement officer, you're going to do your job. Otherwise, you're going to go to jail. And so it's one of those things where, most people say, hey, I don't want to share. HIPAA. You can't ask me about my medical. Well, yes, I can. If you have a asthma problem and something like that, and you got to get into a foot pursuit, and we're going to put you into a asthmatic event or episode or attack, and it's going to potentially cost you your life, then we're not going to hire you, right? Or they're not. I shouldn't say we. They're not going to hire you. That's acceptable. And the other aspect is they're not going to hire someone where we can make their condition worse too. So, say you have a major orthopedic situation, right? That a doctor won't clear you for, something along the lines of some type of maybe spine issue or something. You come into it, and they know wearing a vest or wearing a duty belt with all the extra weight will instantly cause excruciating pain for you, and be hard for you to complete the duty. Well, guess what? We could also make that injury worse, and then that would lead to you getting a medical retirement. Which, why would they do that, right? Why would they pay you for the rest of your life, after a year of service, when they knew you were coming in with that injury, and then they would make that injury worse. So yeah, I've seen people think they're in perfect health and then go in to get a medical exam and get hooked up to an EKG, and they say they have a irregular rhythm, and the doctor, DQ them. I've seen that. I've seen individuals make the wrong statement on their medical or on their PHS or their medical packet, and just because they didn't interpret it right, and it was wrong. They marked something like, hey, do you ever have trouble breathing? And they maybe mark yes to that, and they explain a situation, maybe where they got punched in the stomach one time or something, or the wind got knocked out of them. Have you ever had trouble breathing? And they just misarticulate what that question is, or they misunderstand and then misarticulate their answer as to what that question really meant. And then they'll say, oh, you got DQ because you have trouble breathing. We're not going to put you through a rigorous academy and then possibly cause you to get hurt further. So yes, there's ways for them to get it. The ultimate way is because you sign that release of information saying you will provide them and you will be honest and truthful. Now there's other things that you can go into where you have HIPAA, but you also have the ADA, American with Disabilities Act, where you don't have to disclose a disability if it doesn't. And I'm not a lawyer. Don't quote me on this, right? But it pretty much says where you might not have to disclose certain disabilities if they don't impede your function of doing a certain job. And you could argue that and go down that route, and it would work in some situations, But once again, it's going to come down to how they word and write their documentation. So that would be the big thing. But yeah, they're going to ask you about it. You're going to disclose it. Otherwise, they could technically get you for lying. And then, go from there. They're also going to, if you're in the military, they might ask you, hey, have you ever had this issue? And you'll say yes. And then they might put a pause on it. This could be in the medical or the psych, depending if it was physical health treatment or mental health treatment, where they say, hey, we need reports or x-rays or something from your last primary care visit or your primary care provider, stating that you can move forward, or we need their reports, and they'll make a determination then. So, and those can really freeze a hiring process. And the reason why getting a hiring process stalled is because if you miss that hiring announcement and you miss that academy date, you might either get removed and told to reapply, or you might have to wait another 8 months or so for the academy. It just depends. There's a lot to consider there. That's why we're so big on the preparation phase of getting all that stuff beforehand, if you're aware of things like that, and having the knowledge of what's coming your way beforehand. That's the key to being successful faster. But yeah, 3 great submitted questions. Listen, keep them coming. I will keep getting to all of them as they come through. Remember, we answer all questions on all our social platforms. Predominantly, we are answering questions over on our new blog first. If you go to our website, www.armagonct.com, and you just scroll down to the bottom, you'll see our blog. There's multiple different ways to leave comments on there, and you can tell us whether or not you like that blog with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Also, YouTube is where we go every week, as well as all our other social platforms. So keep them coming, stay safe, and we will see you next time.